Hi, I'm Robin, and today I'm going to be continuing the activity on Traveller and doing some world building. I'm going to be using the Mongoose book from 2008, which I used in the last video. This is part 2, and in this one I'm going to delve in deeper to create some of the planetary objects in the different systems I've got on the star map. I've also going to do a small amount of comparison to a couple of items in this older world building book from the 80s, and just generally talk through that process. Going to try and be a bit sort of creative on how I develop the planets to see whether rolling them up and developing them gives me some ideas for the game I'm about to run with some friends. So as you can see before me, I've got my internet rig set up, various cameras that I can sort of zoom down onto the desktop before me, as well as I use the OBS open broadcast system to mix various data feeds that may be the library I'm developing in the spreadsheet to create this star system, or I could switch between the actual real desktop here and flip down to one of the books that I'm looking at to show you a page I'm interested in. Obviously these books are copyright material, and obviously I'm sharing my process of building my system here, but what I can't do is sort of share every page from these books, but I will sort of flash up a page from the book, just sort of fair usage really, to show you different tables and bits and pieces in there of interest if I see them. But it's best to go out and get these books. I know they've just up to Traveller Edition 5 by Mark Miller, and there's various versions of the Mongoose editions as well still out there, and they've just released various new books for that too. This, as far as I go, is 2008 edition, and I've got the several of the earlier pamphlet style A5 books from the 80s. So the way method I do this is I fire up a couple of apps on my desktop and then I shoot down into them and I can sort of work through. In the last week I've created a Google Sheets, which is just a version of sort of Microsoft Excel. So it's just a bunch of cells and I've just filled them out with the planetary details which I'm going to use. I'm using it again like a template so I can work through that one by one on each system. So if I fire up the actual system here over on the left, so you can see that's the full star map, and it's the traditional subsector size, which is 8 across here and 10 down in terms of systems. Each system last week I ran through and rolled a dice to see whether there's anything in there at all or whether it's just the emptiness of space. Obviously from a campaign and background perspective, the fact that one of these systems is empty doesn't mean it's completely devoid of any spatial objects, space trash, or some other kind of threat that's not been identified, or perhaps a system that was too far out for them to bother exploring. But generally speaking, it's a kind of an accurate representation of the map that I'm going to use in the game, so I'll be sharing it with my players, and this is what they'll know about the environment. So yeah, if you want to see me going through this painstakingly hex by hex, you can do that on the previous video, but I'm not going to do that in this session because it's already sort of cut and down now. So I'm just now interested in this next level of detail in the world building for Traveller by using their procedures for creating everything about the main primary planet or habitable location, whatever that may be, because you could end up rolling up an asteroid and then actually most of the people are living on an attached starbase or something. But generally speaking, this is about the single most important planetary type object in each system. Obviously each system could have multiple planets that are habitable. That could come out of the game, but for the sake of trying to get an entire subsector done, you really want to focus on the primary planetary objects in each one of these and then detail that out, and then you may end up detailing more out. Like you could end up with one being a dirty old asteroid, but actually there being an inhabitable planet on there that's just fantastic for mining resources or something as well. So you could mix up the background a bit from there. So I'll tell you how this is broken down then on my map here. So if we take this one at the top, Lindisfarne, the breakdown is the classic Traveller method of, we find out, has it got a gas giant? Well, first of all, is there a system in there? Then is there a gas giant? And then what kind of class the starport is. So I've got my classes down underneath. So class A is brilliant. Class B is pretty good. right down to class X, which means there's just nothing there. So there's a system there, but really no one's even tried to build a starport, and it's so rough. And these represent the different kinds of bases which I've rolled up. So there's a couple of minor differences between this 2008 Mongoose copy and the earlier edition here. One of them was when you roll up the starports, and I had a comment from someone saying that in a newer version, second edition of the Mongoose copy, they had a method where there would be a modifier applied to the size and type of quality of starport. I couldn't see that in this 2008 one. I couldn't see a modifier, but I could see that they'd put the starport quite far through the build process. But I did it here immediately because I wanted to get the lay of the land, and I wanted to be able to fill up this entire map with a kind of view for what's there generally and what's the classification and class of the different starports, and then roll up the bases that are connected to them. So that was my process, and I think I like doing it that way because it gave me a general view of the whole, overview of the subsystem. I could start to see relationships between different locations. I could start to see, gaps and maybe where there were jump routes as well and things in there. So that was my process, even though it was a little bit later through the book. But going back to the early one, it is right up the front. So you basically, once you've declared that and you've rolled to see whether there's anything at all in one of these system hexes, you can then move straight on to doing the starport. And it's got that down here as well. So you do the world occurrence, check whether there's a gas giant there, and then you're straight into starport type. And then interestingly, they do have another section in here for jump routes, which I seem to remember is missing in this newer one too. And that actually allows you to map out the jump routes procedurally, rolling and determining the distance between the different systems and the classes of starport. So yeah, I didn't do that. I just started putting the jump routes on myself because they seemed to be in the newer book, 2008 Mongoose book. It was all about just being creative and choosing where they would put a jump route, because it wouldn't necessarily be the case that a bigger starport would then link up with a lower grade one. But that's what this procedure generated method does. It kind of checks out the quality of the starport to determine how far the jump might be. So you'd roll a dice and say, well, actually an A to A, since they're so good in terms of quality of starport, even out to a jump 4 distance, so 4 hexes away, on a 5+, you're still going to end up with a jump route that's dedicated between those point to point. I could see myself, if I did do this, I could see the page getting very untidy if I ended up with lots of links between lots of independent locations. So I went for the method in the 2008 book anyway, which was just to be a bit clearer in terms of nice, aesthetically pleasing jump routes that seem to match generally by using my own observation and saying, oh, well, there's an A-class starport and a B here. So they would have some sort of route connecting that would probably go through hops on the way if there was a worthy stop on route as well. So that's what I've done. And now I need to go down system by system. So I'm going to start over here on Talon in here, and I'm going to detail this out in a lot more close surface, well, not surface, well, it's surface detail because it's the sort of surface of the planet detail. So if I leave this up on the screen so we can see it, you can see over here again, as in the last version, I've got my dice tower. So I will be rolling this. People have mentioned as well, why don't I look at using the Traveller map, star map project? And I really like using that. I've used that many times for different bits and pieces, but for this I'm doing this manually. And also when it comes to the spreadsheet that I've got, I've made it to support dice rolling because I wanted to really go through dice by dice and not do it via automation, which you could easily do. You can randomize a number and hit a button and have a macro do the whole lot. But for me, I wanted to sort of dice it in and put the modifiers in step by step as I go. I think if I bring that sheet up now, find the right button. There we go. I've done this in Google Sheets, but I think I've made it in a way where it potentially works for me to help in the process without cluttering up things, because I could have a little bit too much on the screen. So I've tried to make it as neat and simple as possible. And also it's top down. So I go from the top. Obviously the system here, which we know we're working on, is 0106. So that's the system ID in the top field. I've got the name in there as Talon. And then working down, I've got a system summary area. This I'm not going to try and fill in until I've sort of done a lot more, but the system summary will be my summary of understanding the kind of planets in there. So basically, if I've come up with an agricultural garden world full of like I don't know, dictators, and they happen to have high tech or something, I might actually, or a religious type of leadership in there, I'll then color that in with some background in the system summary as a kind of, this is a, you know, a very high level of lore location with a lush planet, and try a little bit more flowery background text in there, which will come out of the detail that I do. So first of all, I know it's got a gas giant. So if you have a look here, when I've done a drop down, I've got it so that 10 to 12, if I'd rolled, wouldn't have a gas giant in there. 2 to 9 does. And I've copied in a kind of a screen paste of the sector, which you can see here, which is also shown on the left of the screen in the bigger map. And then I know I've got a starport class. These things are already done, so I'm not rolling these. So I know already that's a D, and I think that's a 5 or 6, which is poor. And then it pulls through, yep, it's a poor, and they have limited repair facilities. One other, this is another train spotterish nuanced detail, but again, this early Traveller book, it actually had more information in the facilities, and I'm tempted to sort of type them in here to sort of help me colour in the background a bit more, because it sort of went into just a little bit more detail in the table that seemed to have been removed in the 2008 one, that just rather than just saying limited repair, it would say limited repair plus this is little more than a scrap on the ground or something. It just gave you a little bit more colour. And I know, looking at it, that I've got none of these bases on here at all, so I'm not going to tick any of those. Now this is the first important step. So what is the world size? So world size is a 2d6 minus 2. So I've got up this, so apologies for the sound from the dice rolling. So minus 2, 2. So this is interesting. No wonder they've only got a small backward kind of D-class, well, a poor starport. It's not too bad as a starport, is it? So yeah, it's small world size wise. It's giving me some examples which I've copied out of the table as to what it matches, but you know, this is a small location. And then atmosphere type is 2d6 minus 7, but then you get a plus, which I've calculated out for myself here. There's a dice modifier, a DM. Traveller uses the term DM all through all the books for dice modifier. It's a nice, clean, simple way to remember DM. It's not Dungeon Master. You're a referee, they say in Traveller. That's the nomenclature. So I shall roll it. So I've got 7 plus 2, so we're up to 9, and unfortunately it's then minus 7 from that, so we've only got an atmosphere of 2. So if I drop that down in here, so it's very thin, tainted, needs a respirator or filter. That's not great, is it? But it's still interesting. It's interesting what's building up here. And then the temperature. So the temperature is just a 2d6, and you roll a minus. I've got a modifier for the atmosphere. The modifier is minus 2 against that roll. So a 5, minus 2. So we've got a temperature digit of 3. So it's a little bit chilly. It's an icy world, little liquid water, few clouds. So this is a little nugget of a planetoid forming up here. And then the hydro digit, so this is interesting. I've got no modifiers on either of these, but I will just see that I haven't done something wrong here. And potentially, yeah, so it is working. This is the first time I'm obviously doing this live. I have made a couple on here, but I haven't tested it fully. But it is saying no modifiers for the hydrographics type. It's just a straight 2d6. So 10. So that is going to be an interesting one because that's quite high, really. So almost entirely water. So it's basically a solid ice chunk by the sounds of it, which is very interesting. I'm now going to dive out, even though I'm live recording myself here. I want to just see by looking at the guide in the book and just check on that hydro modifier there, just to see that I've not made a mistake and I'm rolling up this incorrectly. Oh, Scions Trade World Creation. So if we go into Atmosphere and then we have a look at the hydro, I just want to see what the modifiers are. So actually, yes, so size 0, 1 hydrographics is 0. So obviously I'm a size 2, so it's a little bit of a chunk. And then if the atmosphere is 0, 1, A, B, or C, and the atmosphere is 2, it would be a -4. So actually, nothing on there at all. No, there was no modifiers. It was just a case of rolling it neatly. And then let's look at atmosphere to just check that I had that modifier correct. Actually, yes, if the atmosphere is, it says here, if the atmosphere's temperature is not D, or any kind of F that is thick enough to retain water, then also apply DMs for temperature, hot or roasting. So nothing there as well. So that's me just checking to see that that's correct before I dive back in again. I bring up that and the map. So yeah, it is an icy world. It's almost entirely a chunk of ice, and it has a very poor base, as we were saying there. So continuing down through the list, we've got population digit, and that's just a simple 2d6 -2. So I will just double check again on the population digit in the book by firing that up. Population is just a straight 2d6 -2. So if I do a big population here, then obviously they're not necessarily all on this frozen rock, or they could be on some sort of base on there. But it is a straight 2d6 -2 for population as detailed on the list here. So let's fire that up. Yep, so population is just a neat 2d6 as detailed here. So I should roll that. I've got a 10. Wow. So literally I have tens of billions of people here. Oh no, I rolled a 10 -2. It's an 8. Schoolboy error there. Hundreds of millions. There's still a lot of people on there, given it's a smallish rock. So there might be some sort of either a structure connected, maybe a colony ship or something that's orbiting this rock for its water, or some other kind of elements that are on there. Or there could be some bases built into this ice world as well. Or it doesn't necessarily. Also, it says it's almost entirely water. It could just be that the first mile depth of the planetoid has a solid packed ice in one way or another. So it doesn't have to be ice to the core. It could be a dirty rock underneath too. So next up, we've got the government digit. So this is normally a 2d6 -7, but with a large population, the larger the population, the higher the modification is here, because the large population generally means that it's more of an evolved government, is what they're dictating with that. So let's roll that up. So I've got a 6. So that is interesting. The -7. Sorry, it's a +8 first of all. So I've got 14, -7, 7. So okay, so balkanization. So no central authority exists. Rival governments compete for control. Law level refers to the government nearest to the starport. So multiple governments, civil war. So around and about this icy planet, there is a lot of different factional stuff going down. So there's some high friction on here. which just makes it a very interesting place, given, you know, Talon as itself is quite sort of poor starport, doesn't show a lot of promise in terms of what it is. But locally, there's a lot of government activity split between different warring or potentially warring states. So now we have law digit and restrictions. And this is an interesting one because, again, in the newer 2008 book, they break down the restrictions by technology type or system type or psionics information. In the older book, again, you only really have weapons in this older pamphlet style book. It's just like a law for the weapons. And this made me think when I was looking at this that potentially in the creation process, you might want to say, well, let's just say you had a heavy genetic propensity for psionic people to live on the planet, and that was part of the background or something. You might have, or you might roll that psionics themselves have a very light level of law, because a lot of people maybe have them, but then they maybe don't like weapons. So the laws around weapons are really tight. The laws around psionics are really open. And the table in this 2008 copy doesn't really cover that. You just set one law level across the whole set. So I don't know if that's something that differs in newer versions or more comprehensive versions of Traveller. But say for the earlier book 3 that I've got here, that was definitely just one law type around weapon control, really. This later 2008 edition has obviously pulled other bits and pieces together and has the controls around lots of varied types of laws, but it's still quite set in stone in that you set the level and it's the same across the board. But I have in mind that you again, you can have a planet where whatever race is mixing with the humans, or if there's even no humans there, they could be really free with their drugs, but really not very good with travelers. So they could be very, very poor in terms of controlling everything to do with people that visit the planet, but their drugs could be completely free. Enough of that sort of weird comparison. So I've rolled a 7, and I've got a +7 from the fact that the government here is a +7 for being the government digit being 7 and its balkanization. So that's taken me up to 14, but -7 for the just general roll that you make is 2d6 -7. So it's on a 7 again. So essentially for weapons, they control everything from shotguns and up. Narcotics is all narcotics. Library programs, unfiltered data about other worlds, free speech is curtailed. Technology, anything TL7 and above is sort of restricted. Traveller citizens may not leave, visitors may not leave starport. So it's quite a restrictive place. Despite the sort of slightly lawlessness that comes from all these balkanized states, they're obviously locking down a lot of activity, and no one likes psionics there. Cultural difference. So this is the D66 you roll. So I'll do the 6, the blue 6 as high, and then the white as low. So that's a 13, because you just read it as if you're reading the digits off there. So 13 on the cultural table. So they're very artistic. Where does that come from? It's a rocky ice planet. You probably can't go outside because the atmosphere is so poor unless you've got rebreathers and things on. And they're really into their art. Maybe ice carvings. But again, that does maybe tie in with these Balkan state style, that there's sort of a creative element to them, and maybe that's partly why they disagree with each other. Now I've put a second cultural differentiator on here because I wanted to roll 2. Normally you just have 1, but I thought it'd be interesting to have a couple that might mix things up a bit. So again, with the 6, the blue 6 here is high. So that's a 44 doing the D66 roll, which is going to be a bit more different, a bit slightly different. I think there's some restrictions when you get up higher. Oh, so everyone is obsessed with or addicted to a substance, personality, act, or item. This monomania pervades every aspect of their culture. So they really like art, but maybe that art is about one particular thing and they're obsessed with something. As we were seeing earlier, all narcotics are very tightly controlled, but it could be that there's some element here that is narcotic, that's a substance, or it could be some sort of personality or other item. That's going to settle in with me, and I'm going to listen to my inner thoughts on that as I go. But as I work through these, my idea again is just to take these as they come, roll them up system by system, and then I'll go in and maybe then colour in that background a bit more, because I would be stuck forever just working on this one system if I sat here and try to work out all the differences between the warring states and the leaderships and everything in there within the structure. So I'm just trying to get it done quick. So we already know the government type is balkanized. It's quite a fractured kind of state that they're living in here, with potentially different factions at play and different individual lords, or however that wants to be played out, barons or something on the planet's surface or orbiting it. And but then you get to roll on factions, and this is other key factions, notable factions on the planet, and you get a +1 actually on the faction roll if the government is 0 or 7, and a -1 if it's 10+, because on a 10+ government they've got things locked down seriously. Yes, but 0 or 7, you get a +1 on this D3 roll. So let's roll it. So we've got a 4, so that's 2, because you half that for a D3, and you add +1 because it's already balkanized. So 3 separate key factions on here, and then each one of the factions you just roll an influence for it. So I've got 6 for the first one, which means it's a minor group with some supporters, not a major group on there. And then the government digit you roll for that as well, which is a 2d6, so that's a 10. Wow, that's interesting. So actually one of these groups is a charismatic dictator that's trying to edge their way in against one of these fractured Vulcan states. And next one up, we've got, because I've got to roll 3 of these up, is a 5. So this is a small group. So a fringe group with a few supporters, but the type of mini party influence here is a 10, another 10. So this is interesting. So we've now got a planet with balkanized states. So far, 2 charismatic dictators opposing the main body or main political group, of which there's probably many anyway, given it's balkanized. And then the last one, I'll do the influence, 8. So I'm pleased about that. This is a more influential group. So this is notable with significant support. So what kind of government are they pretending to be, this guys? So these are only a 4. So, oh, representative democracy. So this time it's a notable, significant group with good support, and they're a democracy. Well, a democratic party of some kind, versus 2 other dictators. They're going to have to come up with some names and things for these when I go down to the next level, but I like the idea. Straight away I've got 2 specific named individuals that are unhappy with each other and unhappy with the general balkanized state, the kind of loose state and controls that were already around this icy rock. So yeah, that's my 3. I have space down here for a 4th if I roll up for 4, but 3, that's quite enough as it is. And the next up is the tech level. This is the final key, sort of, you know, how rich is the technology on this system, well, planet on here as well. And I've got my dice modifiers, DMs, as is the norm in Traveller. Everything's a DM dice modifier. And I can see here that the size of the planet is a +1, the atmosphere is +1, the hydro is +1, and the government is +1. So I've got a total plus of 5 on my tech level. So if I roll a d6, I've got a 5, 10. Wow. So I've just got that to pop in there. So this is a very technical place. And interestingly enough, because it's so small and because it's got a rubbish atmosphere, you get those bonuses there. These are, again, part of the procedural generation, that it's going to give you higher tech bonus because it's so small and no atmosphere. They obviously need technology to be able to live there. And the government gives it a +1 there too. And the hydro, given it's completely like a solid ice, has to provide more tech. They need the tech to survive on this crusty, icy rock. So that's not bad. And then really trade goods is the last thing that I've got on here, and I'll run through. So just a quick one before I dive into the trade goods on there, and that's the travel codes. And this is amber because a government of 7, the Balkanized states, would be amber. So if I come over to the chart here, I'll be making this an amber system to show that it's in a little bit of a fractured state, really. And then trade goods, I've got a table for the trade goods below here. So if I just pop over to that, I should be able to just shift the screen over, you can see. So basically the trade goods are based on size, atmosphere, hydrographics, population, government, law, and tech. And you just whiz down each one to see whether it sort of fits in that location. And I've just transposed what the different items are here. So I'm a size 2, which means I'm not an asteroid, I'm not a garden world, and it's doing nothing else for me too. So atmosphere 2 certainly doesn't have agricultural with atmosphere 2, sort of poisonous. But it says here 2+ is a desert. So essentially, even though it's an icy waste, it is an icy desert. So I'll put DE for desert there. Fluid oceans needs 10+ on atmosphere. It doesn't have it. It's not garden. It's not ice capped because it's just completely iced. It does say industrial is 0 to 2, so I have got industrial trade, so IN. And then further down on atmosphere, non-agricultural, yeah, because there's not going to be anything growing here really, unless it's some strange, bizarre ice moss or something. It's poor because it is a poor atmosphere, and it's not a vacuum. So then down the next one, hydro, I've got 10A here, so it's not hitting any of these up here, although ice capped is 1+, so I can take ice capped. I see. And then right at the bottom here, 10, it is a water world because it's got 10+ in hydro. Even though it's a frozen water world, there's obviously water available. Population, so we've got population 8. No, it's not agricultural. We've not got the high population ones. And 6 to 8 is rich. So interesting, we've got poor and rich down here as trade goods. And then government 7, it's not really giving you any indications there. Law 7, nothing. Tech, now I've got tech 10, and that doesn't provide anything either. But there's it's not low tech, and it's not high tech either, because that's the 12+ on tech. So it has to be really high up there. So we were close to getting the high population status, but there's my sets. If I copy them down all the way down that strip, I can then just copy them in from there down, and we can see what we've got going. So yeah, desert, kind of ice waste desert, ice capped, industrial, non-agricultural, poor, rich, and water world. So yeah, so it's interesting how poor and rich comes up, and I hope I've done that correctly, but it's sort of probably the fact that we've got some interesting atmosphere that's so poor that it creates a kind of underclass on there that are just sort of surviving, because we've got the atmosphere down here as poor. So 2 to 5 it slots in, but then we've got rich because we have a high population on this location too. So we've got a 6 to 8 in the rich location. So I'm liking it so far. It's giving me some good ideas. It's a icy, balkanized, ripped apart, fractured series of factions in here. And then I've created, as we saw, quite a high law level, even though there's so many fractured states together. And then culturally, they're obsessed with something. So they're probably obsessed with a dictator, I would think, because their primary cultural item here is 13, which is artistic and then obsessed with a substance personality. So I think one of these groups here, probably maybe one of these minor groups, has got a dictator, or possibly even a dictator running one of the balkanized states already. But I do like the idea that there is a notable, quite a large group. Maybe this is a poor underclass or something that is a representative democracy. So maybe there is a worker class of ice cave dwellers that are that want to bring democracy to this icy planetoid. So that's feeling good. Yeah, so as a summary of where we are, I'm quite happy with this icy rock. Talon is the system. Actually, I should come up with a name for the actual planet as well, which I'll have a think about in terms of the location. And we can see on my main star map here, it's the only one in the first column of the set of this subsector, and it's the first one we've done of this full subsector. So nearly done now, really. It's a balkanized state. It's fractured. It's very small. I only rolled 2 in total on the world size, so 3,200 kilometers isn't much, is it? So in fact, I've got a picture here to show you. You know, here's Europa and Titan, and there's the moon. So it's just a bit small. It's a wee bit smaller than the moon, really. And it's an ice. It's an ice world. It's a solid packed ice world. I've got some thoughts I've just been having about how that works out, especially linked into the fact that it's got a lot of people living there, hundreds of millions. So how are they living on this small ice packed world? The government's balkanized, so it's kind of fractured state. Nothing's quite very stable, which means it's an amber system. And they've got some interesting cultural differentiators here. They're artistic as their primary, and I put a secondary one in there as obsessed with and addicted to a substance or a person. But they've got 3 groups on here. 2 sort of fringe and minor groups, which are both came up as charismatic dictators, which is interesting, given that it's already that kind of balkanized. But then a large notable group, significant support. So if there's millions of people, perhaps they're all a bit oppressed because they want a representative democracy, whoever this new group is. And that could be that this whole system's at a key point in time where there could be a shift between, you know, following some kind of person that's very charismatic and keeping pressure on the people through to a sort of new group coming through. So I'm going to just tap it in now without actually really thinking too hard about it being sort of flowery and well grammatically positioned. But if there's some things I want to get over about this, I'm going to say, I'm going to give it a name as well. So the Talon systems primary primary center of population and industry orbits. That's not going to work for me. Oh, it is working. It's moving down to the next line. Orbits the small moon-like planet of. I'm just going to literally. I'm going to call it Lylan 12. Lylan is the largest in a string of icy rocks, and this moon sized and beneath, that's what I'm going to say, and beneath, you see my mind working here, beneath this moon sized world's 2 mile thick ice packed surface, spelling mistakes, sorry, is a rich range of mineral and metal deposits, I'll say. and due to the inhospitable nature of the planet, nature of Lyland 12, there, due to these rich resources and those in the smaller chain, Lyland 12s are coveted by various, that's spelt wrong, sorry, by various corporate and political factions. So that's a reasonable start. So due to the inhospitable nature of Lyland 12, the people of this system have chained a series of factory and series of factory and habitat ships so that orbit, that'll do, then I don't have to check the spelling, that orbit the planet. I keep wanting to call it a moon. I'm going to call it a moon because it is moon sized. So that orbit the moon. This chain of ships and factory hulks are known as, and I think I call it the ribbon. The ribbon. And then I can detail out a little bit more. So most of there's no imperial consulate presence in the system, and the fight for resources and material and mineral, fight for minerals, across the small moons has resulted in a fractured state, fractured Balkan state. And then I'll say the underclass, the working class of factory technicians and mining support staff have a growing desire for a more democratic Then I'll say something about the physical things. So I've just been thinking that the actual planet, the moon's surface itself, is ice. But I'm going to say the minerals on Lyland 12 have coloured the ice jet black, and with little to no clouds, and a tainted atmosphere. The surface shines with a dark black icy. Shines with the dark black ice. Now, what we know about the planet, as I was working through this location, we know that they have in addition to some sort of either a substance or maybe a personality. Plus, they also have their primary cultural feature is that they're really into art of some kind. So I'm wondering how that may work out. But if I say the artistic, no, here we go. So maybe something to do with the personality side. The planet's ice, the moon is ice, but it's not really very habitable. The ice in places is 2 miles thick and various mining rigs and facilities are dig deep into the ice to reach the minerals in the core. And so one other thing then I'm going to say is, because this needs to be light, doesn't it? I've got to do sort of a few paragraphs like this for each one of these sectors, and it's got to give me enough of a hook into some ideas about the place. And I could come up with names for both patrons and then some of these factions on there as well. However, I think the artistic thing might be something to do with some sporting stuff. So if I say, with this sort of glassy black surface of the moon, I'll say the people of the region of the Talon sector system are addicted to a creative and deadly sport that takes place, that is streamed live from the surface. I was going to say various personalities I've got no spell check in this. I will spell check afterwards, so if you see any mistakes, sorry, it's just me typing in and trying to think about things at the same time. Look, I called it empirical consul up there. Various personalities compete in military style ice schooners that race and combat each other in the, I'll call it televised, although I mean streamed, but televised is fine, in televised deadly performances. So it's where the heroes are elevated to a status where they gain position, where they take leadership roles in one of several political groups. So I think that's probably this whole system done, and I think that's probably where I'm going to end this video as well, as in I've now been on for, it's probably going to take about, when I've cut it down into shape and edited it and uploaded it for your good selves on the internet, it's probably going to be nearly an hour. So, or at least 45 minutes or so, I'll try and get it under that. But that sort of does it for me in terms of just general, a black icy planet. There's minerals that stain it black, so it's like this sort of shining black ice world. It's got a chain of factory ships around it in a single ribbon. It's called the ribbon. There's no Imperial consulate presence in the system, and the fight for minerals across the chain, see more spelling there, which will be resolved. Apologies for all my poor spelling as I whiz through. Chain of small moons has resulted in a factory political state. The working class of factory technicians and mining supports have a growing desire for a more democratic way of life. However, they are addicted to the streaming sports, which various personalities compete in military-style ice schooners that race and combat each other in the televised deadly performances. So I will just sort of finish that off by saying each of the warring or of the warlike advanced ice schooners have a distinct style and artistic look to their design and build. The more elegant and robust schooners are seen as the height of achievement for the technical staff. That doesn't work. Kind of achievement for the people of Talon. And militarily robust. So we'll just do a quick spell check on that, just to tidy it up. Orbits. So yes, that's a good background. These people from their habitats that are living in the ribbon that circle this particular moon, which is the largest of a chain of these kind of mineral ice worlds here. They watch these sports that take place on the surface, where these sort of giant ice schooners on yes, the whole thing has, you know, there's just basic trading options here for a start for players if they arrive here. You know, into the industrial hub of the ribbon that circles Lylan 12, the main moon here. But at the same time, you know, there's hundreds of millions of people living amongst there that are feeling unhappy with this sort of, and they want a more democratic lifestyle instead of these fractured political groups that are probably lined with different mining factions again in the ribbon as they kind of take out all of the minerals from this region and use them up in whatever industry there is. So that's it. I'm only going to do this one for this video just because that's giving you an idea of my creative process, and depending on how many comments and interest I get, I may go further, but it's quite dry watching me do lots and lots of these. So I'm hoping that if you enjoy it enough, you may encourage me to do a bit more, or say, can you do a few more planets or a few more systems? And then I'll do that. But at the moment, that's enough for me, and that's generally how much detail I'm going to do here. And then as players interact, engage with these areas, I'll probably add more when I know, you know, names of leaders of factions, names of the factions as well, and any other patrons or enemies that they make through their trading. Please comment about all my errors and issues, because there's bound to be some, because combination of things happen. One, I'm putting the calculations in here and kind of taking them out of the book, and it's the first time I've encountered them, and sometimes I'll make a mistake and go, actually, I shouldn't have made that an industrial trade planet, for example, because maybe something wasn't factored in right. There may have been a subnote somewhere in the book that said, by the way, if the atmosphere is tainted, then you can't have this or you can't have that, and I've maybe missed it, but hopefully I've caught enough of it. Plus, it's just fascinating how it turned out being little more than the moon, but with a huge population, icy, and with all these warring states. I quite like the sound of it. It's sort of plus now I've kind of come up with this theory that there's these warrior hero captains that are involved in a kind of a weird sporting kind of situation, sort of televised and streamed to these people that are part of the industry on here, and they're kind of addicted to it, and they're also really into the style of these ships as well.
it could be the kind of pleasure zone for these people. So they grind away in the ribbon industry areas with ships taking off from the surface, or maybe hyperlift type situation, pulling minerals out of the core of this place, plus the surrounding asteroids drawing in minerals as well. But their pleasure zone, where they all have a bit of fun, downtime, could be the planet's surface, and there might be maybe casino ships on the ice as well, that vast sealed ships that sort of traverse the ice, slowly introducing gambling and other kind of hives of nefarious activity on the planet side that maybe get raided to or what have you. Okay, that's my stream of consciousness and imagination for you. Thanks very much for listening in, and hopefully catch you again. But please comment below anything you've seen, or questions or ideas or mistakes you've seen. So I just wanted to show you an old magazine that I've got, a kind of journal copy from early days of Traveller, just because there's some relevant stuff in there. This is issue 11, I think it's about 1982. Really like the way they have this sort of two-colour art in here. Got a green cover, and then they've gone for orange inside, which is a great design consideration, the green working well with where the orange spot colour is inside here too. But as a article, there's an interesting one in here. They have, when I can get to it, they have a referee's guide to planet building in here. And again, that sort of spot two-colour print working there really nicely with the mono artwork, and these are some creatures that they've created as part of this. So this is the kind of next level down again, if I wanted to go into this, which you'd use the sort of animal encounter type guide to create some creatures. And they've got 3 or 4 pages, or maybe 5 or 6 pages on that in here, where they go through the type of environment and then the creatures that you get in there by using that animal guide. So that's another thing if you're going to sort of focus on flora and fauna on the planet. And since this is an ice world, that would be interesting for me to do that. So again, if you're looking around for ideas, obviously that animal book is a good one, the Animal Encounters. But sometimes these old journals have some really valid stuff, and I don't think it matters what version of Traveller you're into. The rules pretty much flow the same, especially when you're looking at a creative background to put as a backdrop to your campaign, and you want some ideas, tuck into some of these older books as well. So I definitely recommend Journal, and I think there were some combined editions of this where they sort of did a best of, but even these aren't too expensive if you're picking them up as well.